A grieving, lonely fisherman found hope and a reason to live when he discovered a baby boy abandoned on his doorstep. He adopted the boy and raised him with boundless love and pride. But 17 years later, a wealthy stranger arrived, threatening to tear their world apart and take the boy away. The weathered fishing boat rocked gently against the dock as Lucas secured the last knot. At 54, his callous hands moved with practiced ease, even as arthritis crept into his joints. The small house on the village outskirts waited for him, just as it had every evening since Maria passed. No children's laughter, no warm embrace, just the quiet company of his thoughts and the photos of the woman he'd loved too much to replace. "Evening, Lucas," old Tom called from his porch. "Good catch today." "Just enough," Lucas answered, lifting his basket. "The fish aren't as lonely as we are, eh?" "You ought to get yourself a dog at least," Tom suggested, "not for the first time. That cottage needs some life in it." Lucas smiled politely but said nothing. Maria had loved dogs. That was reason enough not to get one. The flames danced in the fireplace as he settled into his chair, another solitary evening stretching before him. The day's routine played through his mind, watering the tomatoes at dawn, feeding the chickens, and walking the empty streets to his boat. He glanced at Maria's photo on the mantel. "Should have listened when you wanted children," he murmured. "Always said we had time. Now look at me talking to your picture like you might answer back." Suddenly, a sound cut through his thoughts, faint but distinct. It was like a whimper or cry carried on the winter wind. Lucas lowered his coffee cup and listened. There it was again, more insistent this time. His joints protested as he rose and shuffled to the door. The porch boards creaked beneath his feet as he peered into the darkness. Another cry, clearer now. "Hello?" he called, but only silence answered. His heart nearly stopped when he saw a woven basket on his doorstep, blankets stirring inside. As he knelt beside it, tiny fingers reached up, grasping at the cold night air. "Dear God," he whispered, gathering the bundle into his arms. A baby boy, no more than a few months old, stared up at him with big, curious eyes. "Where did you come from, little one?" Lucas scanned the empty street, but whoever had left this precious cargo was long gone, leaving just a note in the basket. "Don't look for me. Please take care of him, and love him like your own. Thanks, goodbye." The baby whimpered, and Lucas felt something stir in his chest. It was an emotion he thought had died with Maria. "Shh, it's all right," he soothed, cradling the child close. "Let's get you warm, Maria," he whispered to the night sky. "I think you might have had a hand in this. You always said miracles come when we least expect them." Inside, Lucas wrapped the baby in one of Maria's old quilts, its faded flowers still soft after all these years. The infant's cries settled into gentle coos as Lucas warmed some milk on the stove, remembering how old Tom's daughter used to feed her babies. "You need a name, little one," he murmured, testing the milk's temperature on his wrist. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around his weathered thumb, holding on with surprising strength. "You've got a good grip there. Like a fisherman." The baby gurgled, his eyes fixed on Lucas's face with what seemed like curiosity. A tear rolled down Lucas's cheek as he remembered Maria's words from years ago. A child's love is the purest thing in this world. "Matthias," he said softly, the name coming to him like a whisper from the past. It was Maria's father's name, a good, strong name for a boy. "What do you think about that, little one? Would you like to be Matthias?" The baby cooed, a smile breaking across his tiny face. Lucas felt his heart melt completely. "Then it's decided. You'll be my son, Matthias. I may not have much, but everything I have is yours. We'll figure this out together." That night, Lucas made a makeshift crib from an old wooden crate, lining it with soft blankets. He placed it next to his bed, unable to bear the thought of the child being alone in another room. As moonlight filtered through the window, he watched Matthias's chest steadily rise and fall. "I promise you," he whispered, reaching down to touch the baby's velvet cheek, "I'll be the father you deserve." The baby slept peacefully, one tiny hand still curled around Lucas's finger, as if already knowing he was home. 17 years passed like leaves on the wind. The garden grew fuller, nourished by the sound of Matthias's laughter. Every morning, Lucas would wake to find Matthias already in the garden, talking to the chickens as he fed them. "Morning, Dad," Matthias would call out. "Rosa laid 2 eggs today. She's your favorite, isn't she?" "Just like you're my favorite son," Lucas would reply with a wink. "I'm your only son," Matthias would laugh, the sound warming Lucas's heart more than any summer sun. One morning, as they worked together in the garden, Matthias looked up suddenly. "Dad, remember when you told me about finding me?" Lucas's hands stilled on the tomato vines. "Of course." Were you ever sorry that someone left me here?" Lucas pulled his son close, soil-covered hands and all. Matthias, you weren't left here. You were given to me. The greatest gift I've ever received. Even greater than when Mom said yes to marrying you, Matthias asked, his voice muffled against Lucas's shirt. She would have loved you to the moon and back, Lucas said, his voice rough with emotion. Sometimes I see her in the way you tend to these plants. She had that same gentle touch. Each morning, Lucas watched his son devour breakfast before school, marveling at how the abandoned baby had grown into this bright, energetic young man. Matthias's eyes, so mysterious that first night, now sparkled with intelligence and mischief. Dad, he called, bursting through the door after school. Coach says I might make team captain next season. Lucas looked up from his fishing nets, pride warming his weathered face. That's my boy. Your mother would have he caught himself, as he sometimes did, speaking of Maria as if she were Matthias's birth mother. Tell me about her again, Matthias asked softly. About how she used to garden, how she'd sing while cooking. Another time, son, these nets won't mend themselves. You always say that, Matthias teased, grabbing an apple from the bowl. One day you'll run out of nets to mend, and then you'll have to tell me everything. Everything? Lucas chuckled. Like how you used to think the chickens laid different colored eggs because they ate rainbow seeds. Suddenly, the screech of tires outside cut through their comfortable chatter. Through the window, Lucas watched a sleek red Mercedes pull up. It looked completely out of place in their humble neighborhood, like a peacock in a chicken coop. A tall man in an expensive suit emerged from the car, his shoes too shiny for their dusty street. He approached with purpose, each step measured and confident. The knock, when it came, seemed to echo through the house. Can I help you? Lucas asked, opening the door just wide enough. Mr. Lucas? The man's voice was cultured and careful. I'm Elijah. We need to talk about the boy. I'm here to take him. The words hit Lucas like a gut punch. He had always lived in constant fear of their peaceful life being shattered, but he never imagined it would happen so quickly. Who on earth are you? I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his fingers tightening on the doorframe until his knuckles went white. I think you do. Elijah's eyes fixed on a point over Lucas's shoulder. Hello, Matthias. How do you know my name? Matthias stepped forward, despite Lucas's protective arm. Because you're my nephew and I've been looking for you for 17 years. Elijah's voice softened. May I come in? This isn't a conversation for doorways. Lucas felt his legs go weak, but he stepped aside. In the living room, Matthias sat close to him on the worn sofa, their shoulders touching. You can't just come in here, Lucas said, his voice trembling. You can't just walk into our lives after 17 years and... Dad, Matthias touched his arm gently. Let's hear him out. The story spilled out like water from a broken dam. Elijah spoke of his sister Matthias's mother, of her struggles, her disappearance, and her deathbed confession just weeks ago. She was young and scared, Elijah explained, his perfectly manicured hands clasped in his lap. Our father wouldn't have understood. She ran away with you after her boyfriend. Your dad dumped her, hoping you could have a better life than she could provide at that time. So she left me on a doorstep. Matthias's voice cracked, like I was nothing. She watched, Elijah said softly. She watched Lucas take you in. Watched from afar as you grew. She chose this house because she'd seen Lucas with his wife before. She knew you'd be loved here. She told us everything when we found her, after 17 exhausting years. You have to understand, Elijah continued, turning to Lucas. He's all we have left of her. And there's so much waiting for him. The best schools, connections, opportunities. A life beyond, he gestured at their modest surroundings. This life, Lucas interrupted, his voice fierce, has been filled with more love than any luxurious mansion could hold. Dad, please, Matthias whispered, squeezing his hand. He's right, though, isn't he? Lucas's voice broke. You deserve more than fishnets and vegetable gardens. More than an old man's company. He deserves a better life, Elijah chimed in. I want to go, Matthias said softly after a long silence. Lucas turned, stung. The words felt like Maria dying all over again. Just to know them. To understand. Matthias's eyes pleaded for understanding. I'll come back, Dad. I promise. I need to know where I came from to know where I'm going. Of course you will. Lucas forced the words past the lump in his throat. This is your home. It always will be. The goodbye was quick, too quick for 17 years of love. Lucas helped pack a bag, his hands shaking as he folded Matthias's favorite blue sweater, the one he'd saved 3 months of fishing money to buy. The garden, Matthias said suddenly, pausing at the door. Don't let it die while I'm gone. Mom's roses especially. Lucas nodded, not trusting his voice. I'll call every day, Matthias promised, hugging him fiercely. Every single day. And I'll be back before you know it. Lucas stood in the doorway, watching the red Mercedes disappear, taking his heart with it. The last thing he saw was Matthias's face turned backward, watching him through the rear window, pressing his hand against the glass. Days blurred together, and the silence around Lucas grew heavier with each passing week. Matthias's calls came regularly at first, full of wonder at his new world. Then, less frequently, shorter, until they felt like conversations with a stranger. The vegetables ripened and died on the vine. Lucas couldn't bear to pick them up without Matthias's help. Even the chickens seemed to miss him. Rosa wouldn't lay eggs for days, and the others pecked listlessly at their feed. He's not coming back, is he, girl? Lucas murmured to Rosa one morning. Can't blame him. Who'd choose this hut over the castle they're offering him? Every night, he'd sit in Matthias' room looking at the soccer trophies, the school photos, and the little seashell collection they gathered together over the years. He's living the life he deserves. Lucas told Maria's picture each night. The life he'd have wanted for our own. But God, I miss him. Miss him like I miss you. The house felt bigger somehow, and emptier. The silence was no longer peaceful, but oppressive. Lucas found himself talking to the chickens more, just to hear any voice in the yard. Then, one evening, a knock came at the door as Lucas sat staring at his untouched dinner. Different from that first time, softer, uncertain. He opened the door to find Matthias standing there, shoulders slumped and eyes red. I couldn't sleep, Matthias said simply. The beds are too soft and the house is too big. Everything's too much and not enough. Son, what are you? They're nice, Dad. They're my blood. But your Matthias's voice broke. You're my father. The only one I've ever needed. The only one I'll ever need. I can't be without you. The chickens have been clucking your name all day. Lucas joked, wiping away a tear. Just the chickens. Matthias managed a watery smile. Tears welled in Lucas's eyes as he looked at his son, his heart overflowing with love and pride. What about your uncle? Don't worry, Dad. I'm sure he'll come for me again. But this time I'm not leaving you no matter what. Lucas pulled him close, feeling the tears soaking into his shirt. Welcome home, son. Welcome home. As they walked into the house, Matthias looked around, his face glowing with nostalgia and relief. He took Lucas's hand, holding it tightly as if to make up for the weeks they'd been apart. They knew they were all each other needed.